From Dreamtown, I'm Simon Sticker, Head of Communications and Stories, and this is Unseen Spaces. In today's episode, we take the journey all the way to Uganda, to Kampala, into the K-zones in Kampala. The K-zones are slum communities that are around Kampala, in Kampala. There are a lot of them existing there, and we've been doing interventions with our partner network for active citizens there for a while now. Our main focus as Dreamtown, as an organization in Uganda, is on green spaces, and we work with green spaces specifically around the issue of climate adaptation, and that is what we will hear a lot in this episode, as well as urban farming as a means also to generate income for people living in those K-zones community. I'm joined today again by Nina Ottosen. Nina is the head of programs here at Dreamtown, and she will tell us more about our efforts in Kampala and what we've been doing there together with youth in the K-zones to adapt to the changing climate, as well as kind of finding new innovative potential for them to generate income and come up with new solutions for the problems that they face. So Nina, describe for me, with Ghetto Go Greens, we are in the K-zones in Kampala. Describe a little bit for me, like, how does life in the K-zones look like for someone that is living there? What do people do? It's like, what are maybe the challenges that they kind of face in those communities?
So in Ghetto Go Green, we are active in 7 of the K-zone communities in Kampala. And those communities, we have a lot of people living there, and especially a lot of young people. And many of them live on a very day-to-day basis. In general, there are many people who don't have jobs, a lot of people who work in the informal sector. Maybe that's working at the market, going outside of the community, outside of the city to do like a day-to-day job. Not a lot of stability in general in getting an income. There are many people living there in quite small spaces. And the young people struggle a lot with getting a job, getting access to opportunities in general. Many of them don't have a lot to do throughout the day. So when you're there, you'll see a lot of young people kind of hanging out around. And that's one of the things where this project can really contribute.
Do people kind of see that as do they have awareness that this is like an issue that is related to climate change? Or is that something where they maybe see like a change, but where they can't really say what it is, where that comes from?
Yeah, I think that's exactly one of the things we try to tackle, because like you're saying, people see the issue, obviously, because they see it in front of them every day, but they don't necessarily link that challenge to climate change. They see the effect, but maybe they don't understand the causes. So what the project also does is to try to improve people's awareness of how these things are linked together, and that climate change is part of the reason that they're seeing increasing flooding in their communities. Because obviously knowing what the cause is makes us better capable of trying to at least adapt in a direction that makes sense and is meaningful.
What do you think is like having, for people in those communities, having a knowledge about climate change? It's like, how does that help them with tackling the challenges and the issues that they face there?
Yeah, I think that here it makes sense to speak on the part of climate justice. That's one of the things that in general, the effects of the climate crisis, it hits hardest on those people who have caused it the least. Because it's not the people living in the K-zones in Kampala that are the big contributors to the climate crisis, and yet they suffer the most. So I think there's an element of justice simply, and there's an element of empowerment in having access to knowledge about what it is that goes around you and affects your life so much. So I think there's a huge thing around justice when it comes to climate change, that that people are aware of what it is that causes those things, that challenge them in their everyday life.
I'm thinking of like someone living in the community, right? It's like how you described it, kind of living day to day, trying to, make ends meet, right? It's like, and then kind of thinking, okay, we kind of face those issues with flooding, for instance, in our communities, and that becomes like a huge issue, but it's almost like it's on top of like a lot of other issues that are there. Yeah. So it's a little bit about like how, that kind of that knowledge in a way like improves like their strategies to adapt maybe.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, there is also, if we need to change behaviors, then people need to see the motivation to change those behaviors that are not in favor of the environment and not in favor of that adaptation towards the effects of the climate crisis. So if you don't have the knowledge, how will you know and how will you be motivated to make any change? So definitely there's an aspect of when we work together with people who definitely have their struggles, and climate change is not first on their agenda, which is totally understandable. But then what we do in the project is also link the climate change adaptation and the climate smart solutions in everyday life to a way of making an income. So that means that trying to be innovative on ideas for making products, or having young people develop their urban gardens, which at the same time creates more green space in their communities, but also gives them a way of generating an income, or simply growing food that they can have in their households, share with the neighbors. So combining something that's in the interest of adaptation with something that's in the like very immediate interest of an individual or a family or community, I think is key. And I think we have a huge responsibility of linking our different projects with a motivational factor that actually makes a change also here and now as much as we can in people's lives. Again, these people that we work with in Ghetto Go Green are not the primary drivers of these challenges. So we need to combine things in this way, I think.
I think it's also, I mean, it's such a crucial part to have this link to something immediate. I mean, we know that from our own world, right? It's like the kind of, even now in kind of rich Denmark, how difficult it is for us to kind of adapt to climate change and make decisions that, might be painful in the short term, but have like a big effect on the long term. And of course, it's like for someone that is living day to day, that is even harder to make a decision on, say, like, this is a strategy that would help that we don't have so much flooding, but it's maybe like the next time flooding happens is in like a year from now or so, and I just want to have food on the table tomorrow, and that's my primary driver right now. So it's kind of linking that up, I think, is like a really important part. Now we talked a lot about like the bits and pieces. Maybe describe Ghetto Go Green, what we do there, to have, for people to have understanding of what this project is all about.
For sure. So Ghetto Go Green is a program that we run together with our partners from Network for Active Citizens and their network of a number of community-based organizations, one in each of these 7 K-zone communities in Kampala. And the main objective is to have young people take lead in climate change adaptation and in the creation of green spaces in their communities. And through that process, they gain skills and they gain knowledge that can also help them generate an income through these different climate smart solutions. And that can mean a lot of different things. So in Ghetto Go Green, in each of the 7 communities, young people have come together to create a green public space. So an area in their community which is green. It has demonstration gardens that can inspire people with different elements of doing urban gardening. It has places you can meet and hang out. Young people come there to discuss and just basically have a place to be that's nice, that's green, that's comfortable. And then at the same time, there's a focus on advocacy. And that means to have young people's priorities, young people's development needs in the kind of the green agenda for the city, to have that heard at the political level.
There's like 2 challenges I see with like setting up a program like that, right? Like the one thing is the challenge of space, that when we are like in settlements, that most of them are kind of informal to begin with. So there's a lot of issues with kind of who owns the land and who has like the rights to use land. So kind of how do you set up like a public space in that?
Big challenge. I think that's a challenge across, not only in Kampala, but anywhere we work where we want to create access to public spaces. So we've been using different strategies. In some of the communities, we've been lucky that there has been community-owned land available, that then through a dialogue with the youth setting up the space and the different decision makers, so like those people who decide in the communities, have been seeing the point of developing the green spaces. That in itself is a big advocacy process, like getting access to that land. Having it be community owned is like the best solution. That's our first priority, because already then you have some shared ownership. But in some of the communities, it's also been the solution to go into dialogue with private landowners. Maybe they have a space that they're not utilizing. Maybe they themselves don't at the moment have the funds to develop something on that piece of land. So it's just kind of sitting there like unused. Then there's a big process of having them again see the point of why would we prioritize that land for a green space. That's been a long process in some of the communities. Some of them are still in that process. But it's worked out really well when they have then seen what we've been able to make at these places. So after setting up most of the green public spaces in these communities, those landowners have actually been like, okay, this is quite cool, it works out. Maybe some of them have a deal where they get a little bit of the vegetables that are grown in the garden themselves. So that's actually worked out pretty well, but it's a long process, it's a hard one. It really takes some negotiation. But now we're actually seeing in one of the communities in Chinawataka, there's a much bigger piece of land next to the existing green space, and they're talking about expanding it because, and this is a privately owned land, because the lady that owns it has really seen what kind of change it's created in the community for the young people. No longer seeing people hang around, being idle, maybe engaging in some not super smart activities like illegal stuff or hanging out on the street at night, but seeing young people take actively part in developing these gardens, having a nice place to be, creates a good atmosphere around them as well in the community. Yeah.
And what is like was the second challenge, like this basically having kind of the young people's voices heard, right? It's like you said at the beginning also that a lot of them, they have like nothing really to do, right? It's like, there's like a lot of issues about being young in a place like that. And one of it, from experience we can tell, I think, is that they're like the kind of the last one on the list that people listen to. It's like, how do we kind of work with that challenge and how do we try to overcome that?
Yeah, so within the project we have different activities designed to facilitate dialogue between young people, community members, maybe elders, and these duty bearers, those that make the decision, the local councillors, the local youth leaders, the local chiefs, and like chair people at the community level. So one of the activities that's been really successful is community youth parliaments, is what we call them. And it's these meetings that are facilitated by the young people. From meeting to meeting, they decide on an issue that they'll take up next time. So that could be the challenge of waste management in the community. So then we have an agenda. It's a group of maybe 20 young people from around the community that come together. They invite those duty bearers in their community that have a relevance to the issues that they're discussing. So those from the city, for example, responsible for waste collection. Then they discuss what the challenges are in their specific communities, and they ask questions. Again, keep the decision makers accountable. They get a chance to respond because probably they already understand there is a challenge, but what can then be done? And that's actually resulted in us having seeing the change that in some of the communities now they did actually increase how many times does the garbage truck come past the community, where before it didn't really come. Now it comes maybe even twice a week to some central spots to pick up the waste from the community. So I think a super important thing is simply just facilitating the platforms where young people have the floor, where their voices are like what we're here for, and then that the decision makers are kind of also forced to listen. Mm-hmm. Another thing is also that that Network for Active Citizens have developed an app, and they call it Youth Go Budget. And this app is a tool to collect young people's priorities and put them in the context of the policy field. So what do the young people think should be prioritized? So that they kind of get a collection, like a mapping of youth priorities that they can then take, develop some position papers and hand over to those that will eventually sit down and make the policies. And then hopefully in the end, someone will listen if we do it for long enough time and like with a lot of people.
Yeah. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the impacts that we hope to achieve? You talked a little bit about like both like the climate adaptation, but also this idea with the urban gardening part and what happens at the community level, but then also what the idea is what happens basically after that from the people that participate in that.
Yeah, I think one of the most amazing things when we've gone and visited those that take part in Ghetto Go Green is that you enter the community and then we go to the green public space, and afterwards we've been taking around to see all these small urban gardens that, because the young people who are engaged in the green public spaces where they have these demonstration gardens, what they do is that they take it home. And they might not have a big space, but then suddenly you go for a walk, you turn the corner, and it's just green all over. Because they have seen the ideas, and then they test them out at home. So maybe you simply just have a really small space outside your house, or you have some walls around that you can also plant and hang stuff on. But it's really just proving that they're really like no space is too small to develop something. And so, like I talked about before, with one impact being having these bigger areas of green space in the communities, but now we're suddenly seeing that, I mean, hundreds of young people around in the community are making their own little gardens at home where maybe they grow different vegetables and berries and herbs and stuff that some of them just use for home consumption for their own family household food. Some of them even sell it at the market, and they're starting to also give away seedlings to others. So it really does like grow from garden to garden, like literally, because people come around, and when they move around in the community also see these gardens and get inspired to take it on by themselves. So for some of the young people, it's really become like a source of income. At the same time, it creates a green environment for everyone else in the community. So it's pretty cool to see how much innovation there is around. Suddenly you see someone that plants it in an old toilet or in a pair of trousers or in a handbag. It creates a super also creative environment around it, which is just amazing to see.
Unseen Spaces is a production of Dreamtown. Today's episode's guest was Nina Ottosen, Head of Programs at Dreamtown. All video from Uganda was filmed in February 2022 by me. I'm your host, Simon Sticker, Head of Communication and Stories here at Dreamtown. Thank you for listening. Until next time.